Geriatric Services campus. Working collectively with the FBI and the state police afforded us the ability to investigate this incident in extreme detail. Within days, the responsible party was quickly identified through DNA analysis and of evidence left at the scene. The subject was arrested yesterday morning, so that would have been April 15th, and he has been charged in a criminal complaint through the federal court in Springfield. The Longmeadow Police Department has a zero tolerance for crimes motivated by hate. Hate crimes are an attack on the values of Longmeadow. Any incidents which are intended to cause harm or terror in our community will be investigated aggressively and dealt with in a swift and strong response. The Longmeadow Police Department keeps our faith-based communities on the forefront of our efforts, and we will continue to take a proactive approach to prevent senseless acts of violence based on ideologies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As select board, speaking for the select board, we were very saddened to hear this happened in our community, and we can't thank our police enough for the work they stepped in. It's been a very difficult time with the crisis for JGS, and to have this happen, attack on them is attack on the whole family of Longmeadow. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to go on to the COVID-19 update by Chief Dearborn.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, this is Chief Dearborn. Thank you for the opportunity to update the board on the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll give you a few numbers, not including our elderly housing and nursing facilities, and according to the Mass DPH, as of today, we have 13 active cases in Longmeadow, so we're in pretty good shape. The nursing home continues to be the center of an outbreak. They continue to do testing. They have a state epidemiologist assigned to their case. As of today, we have no active cases at Emerson Manor, one at Genesis House, one at Ruth's House, and one at Glenmeadow. Ruth's House and Glenmeadow are both doing in-house testing as part of a protective strategy. We have the same epidemiologist assigned to assist with the planning of all these facilities, and we work with all these facilities daily and are assisting in many ways. No number of COVID-19 related EMS calls in the residential part of our community continues to be low, but it is steady. Community as a whole has seemed to have settled into this marathon. We're not seeing any significant issues. Service demands are steady, but very sustainable. All public safety employees are currently working with no one on quarantine or out sick. Knock on wood. We continue to see great community support with donations of PPE and other items. We currently have a robust supply of PPE and continue to see a great deal of support from the state. The COVID-19 task force has been actively discussing reopening plans. The struggle is when and how this will happen. Today's anticipated announcement of schools remaining closed for the rest of the year and daycares remaining closed until the end of June is certainly an indicator that we'll be in this for longer than we had hoped. We do anticipate more guidance from the state this week. We anticipate guidance on reopening to be based on benchmarks. When certain benchmarks for testing, tracing, hospital counts, and other factors are reached and maintained for a period of time, certain aspects of the governor's orders will be modified and maybe in some cases lifted. These benchmarks and what the orders and guidance will look like are critical information needed for our planning. As I stated, the task force and individual departments have a, quote, things to do list to reopen. However, many questions remain. I think I speak for all our department heads as we look forward to getting our operations back to our new normal. We are doing some things in anticipation of reopening. We have modified the areas where we interact with the public by installing new service windows. We are in the process of procuring masks to be available to all of our employees, and we've designed new cleaning procedures. On another note, one concern we have seen is people who need medical care being reluctant to seek it for fear of contracting the virus. The ambulances and the hospitals are very safe, and the likelihood of contracting the virus by using these services is very low. The ambulances are cleaned after every call, and the hospitals isolate even suspected COVID patients. If you have a medical emergency, please call 911 and get the care you need. Don't wait for your symptoms to get worse. In the case of a stroke or cardiac emergency, this could make the difference in your recovery. Again, I want to thank all of our residents for their efforts in social distancing. I realize this is very challenging. We fully believe that this has slowed the community transmission. This is not the time to relax, however. We are at the top of the surge. We all need to stay engaged in social distancing to keep the spread of this spread of this virus slow and managed. Thank you. I'll answer any specific questions.
Thank you, Chief. Mark Gold, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just have a quick question for the chief. It's really for the task force, and that is there any talk about community-wide testing or planning for testing on a community basis once that testing is known or in place from either the state or other facilities?
So I don't have a specific answer for you, Mark, but I will tell you that we have had discussions with the state for 2 types of testing, and looked at the high school as a possible testing site. But beyond very preliminary planning for that, we have that has not moved at this point. So,
thank you.
Richard Foster, do you have any questions or comments?
Nothing, Marie.
Tom Lakusha?
Yeah, Chief, I've talked to a number of people who feel that they've had some of the symptoms of COVID and were never tested. And I just wondered, is it possible? I mean, I would think people who may have had it, would have had enough symptoms that they would have recognized it. But is there any way to assure people that they did not have it other than testing them?
Tom, based on the information I had, so we are seeing in the testing at the nursing home and a lot of the information being provided by Mass DPH that a segment of the population can actually have this virus and never show symptoms, or actually only have very mild symptoms. A loss of taste or smell, a dry cough for a few days, a very mild fever, and then recover fully and quickly. And, again, be completely asymptomatic. We actually have seen this in some of the testing we've done at the local facilities. So, so I think people's suspicions could be correct in that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mark, Richard, Tom? Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Marie.
We have a few minutes, so I want to move up to select board comments. Mark Gold, do you have any select board comments?
None at this time.
Thank you. Richard Foster, any select board comments?
No, Marie.
Tom Lakusha, any select board comment?
No, Marie, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. This brings us right up to the 3 minutes before our hearing on the Eversource. So I'm going to move resident comments to after our Eversource petition because we're supposed to start exactly at 7:15. I was going to combine the hearing for Eversource petition 4886 with Eversource petition 4887. Mark Gold, do you have any objection to that?
None.
Richard Foster, any objection to combining the 2 petitions?
None.
Tom Lakusha, any objection?
None.
Thank you. And Eversource, do you have an objection to handling both petitions under one hearing?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will be looking for a motion to open the hearing for Eversource petition 4886 and the hearing for Eversource petition 4887.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second by Richard Foster.
Okay, so Mark Gold moved and a second by Richard Foster. A roll call vote.
Marie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Okay, so we are open on the hearing on both petitions. And sir, would you identify yourself from Eversource?
My name is Edward Sliz. I'm a senior project specialist, and we are petitioning for a manhole system that's going to be coming out of Franconia substation to West Chestnut. And we're going to also install 2 poles on the road of West Chestnut to enhance the reliability, replacing the old conductors and installing new cables underground, replacing the old ones, and installing a loop scheme system, which would severely give you greater reliability in the area.
Okay, Debbie, do you need the gentleman to spell his name?
No, I have it. Thank you, Marie.
Okay. All right, and so for under Eversource Petition 4886, sir, which is that? Is that the manhole?
The manhole, that's the overhead petition, the poles, 2 poles, 4886.
Mm-hmm.
And 4887 is your manhole system coming out of Franconio Sub down West Chestnut Street
Oh,
to
okay.
the intersection of William Street.
All right, I'm going to go through the select board members. Mark Bullen, do you have any questions for Eversource?
Yeah, first question is why is this needed? And Marie, you want all the questions now, or you want me to just go serious?
No, just you ask all your questions now.
Okay, why is this needed? What's changed that requires it today? Are you going to be doing any work under the road we just paved? And what's the impact going to be on traffic?
Okay, why we're doing this is the underground cables are very old and we're having faults recently and in the past, and we've been keeping counts of it, so it's time to replace the old cable underground. And what's also happening, they did a load analysis test of the substation in your town, and the load growth is growing, so we're going to increase the wire sizes, the poles, to take the capacity so you don't run into problems down the road in your future, because what's happening is we're going to have to start swapping loads on certain circuits, and it's putting a stress on it, and you're going to start having circuits, burning down, and this will help it tremendously increasing. And for the traffic, we are going to be working basically on a road that leads right into our substation, so there's no traffic that comes in. And as for working in the road, the new road, we're going to be going across William Street overhead and underground. And how we're going to do that underground is we're going to do a direct bore. It's going to go underneath. They're not going to lift up. They're not going to cut the road or work on that at all. It's like 80 feet under the road. So they'll do a directional bore. So no disrupt of the blacktop.
Mark, any follow-up questions?
None. Thank you very much.
Richard Foster, any questions or comments?
None.
Tom Lakusha?
Yeah, I just wondered, it talked about having parallel, transmission cables, and it looked like there was going to be a trench, but there is no digging up the road then? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, what we're going to have is one circuit's going to go across, coming out of West Chestnut, across William Street overhead, and the other circuits can go underground from the manhole system. And there's going to be a directional bore under the road.
Oh,
So
bore
basically,
under the
they're
road.
under the road. So
Okay.
they're not going to touch the surface of the road.
Okay, good, because we've redone those roads in that area
Yes.
recently, and it's nice to know that you'll be boring. That makes it a lot easier for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
I had a question. I guess we received, and that might be where the confusion's coming from, the DPW Director. You were required to get a road opening permit before you start the work, but you're not going to be breaking into the road.
No, we're just going to bore underneath the road. So basically, they're going to make a pit by the pole on the William Street side, on both sides, a pit, and they'll just bore under the road. So that's the most of the excavation you're going to be, but it's going to be on the grass.
So the Mario Mazar, DPW Director, recommended the following conditions: a road opening permits required before the start of work. Town trees must be protected during construction, and you have to reach out to the tree warden for applicability. Contaminated soils, if encountered, shall be removed at the expense of the applicant, and all disturbed areas shall be restored to original or better condition. Were you aware of these requirements by DPW?
Yes, I was reading on your paperwork, the requirements they're suggesting. It's no problem.
Any further questions or comments, Mark?
And just Marie, I think Mario's comments were based on the fact that they're going to trench on either side of the road in order to do that boring underneath. So I think it's applicable.
Okay. Richard, any more questions or comments?
None.
Tom Lakusha?
No.
And do we have any residents that have come to speak during the hearing, Lynn? I don't see any listed on our board.
No, Rebecca Townsend's on the call, but I don't imagine she's here to speak on this. If she, I see that that's somebody chatting here. No one's here to speak on it.
Okay. Can I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
That was Mark Gold. Is there a second?
Second by Richard Foster.
Okay. Roll call vote, Debbie? Roll call vote?
Marie,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like two different motions. I'm looking for a motion regarding the Eversource petition 4886.
Marie, I'll make a motion to approve Eversource petition 4886 contingent upon them meeting the requirements set forth by the DPW in their memo of April 14th.
Okay, is there a
Second by
second?
Richard Foster.
Richard Foster seconded it. Any further discussion? Okay, a roll call vote, Debbie?
Marie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
All right, I'm now looking for a motion on Eversource petition 4887.
I'll move that we approve Eversource petition 4887 based on requirements or conditions set forth by the DPW Director in his memo of April 14th, 2020.
Richard Foster seconds.
Roll call vote?
Marie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, sir, for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we will ask for resident comments. Lynn, do we have any resident comments that have come in?
I am not seeing anyone.
Okay.
Nope.
All right, why don't we go straight to the town manager's report then?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you needed announcements.
Oh,
And
yes.
we had to quickly go to the hearing to open it on time, and I
That's
forgot the
okay.
announcements.
All right, let me pull that up. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I had a few announcements for tonight. One is just to remind people of the town meeting date change. It's been changed from May 12th to June 23rd, and a location and time will be confirmed soon. Another reminder about the Census 2020. You can complete your federal 2020 census online, and I linked it here, but it's https:// It's pretty easy. I did the online one and it only took about 10 minutes. And virtual town hall, if you have business that you need to conduct with town offices, you can access a lot of those services online at longmeadow.org/virtual town hall.
Okay, thank you. Any announcements from the select board? Mark Gold?
None.
Richard Foster?
No, but I did have one quick question. I see John's still on. Are we going to fall, well, John and the town manager, are we going to fall under the guidance of the governor of the state for all of our opening procedures?
You want to go, Lynn, or you want me to?
Either one.
So-
Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, so so basically we followed the governor's guidance, Richard, for all of our closings and basically everything we've done so far is for managing, public spaces and things like that. So I think a lot of that will come, we will follow their reopening guidance. Obviously, if there's something that doesn't work for us, we can modify it. But I would think following their benchmarks, their guidance, the modification and orders is a pretty clear roadmap. At least what we're hearing it's going to look like. Obviously, if there's something that doesn't work, I believe we'll modify it or come to the board and discuss it. So I hope I answered that for you. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only concern I had, John, is what we see happening on national TV, where there's more opinions than there are hair on a squirrel in my backyard. And that's what I was wondering, whether that's our guidelines, or are you hearing anything across the state? Do we got any, no better word, renegades that are trying to get press time and saying they're going to open early regardless? Any of that type of stuff going on across our state?
I'm not aware of anything like that. I would encourage the town. I mean, the guidance I'm going to provide, and I certainly believe Lynn will agree with me, because we've been in complete agreement, is to actually follow guidance that's provided by the state. Everything I've seen so far has been scientifically based. I believe a lot of what we've done has worked. I pay really close attention to the rate of transmission in the community every day, and I'm really proud of the residents of Longmeadow, because when you look at those big reports from the state, our numbers don't look good, and that's really most of that's related directly to the cluster at the nursing home. But if you actually look at our in-town residential community numbers, we're doing excellent. So, and I want to keep it that way. So I think following guidance that has a scientific basis is certainly a good practice, and that would be my recommendation to continue.
That's all I have, Marie.
No, I have no comments, questions.
All right, Lynn, do you want to go ahead with your town manager's report?
Sure. So to keep people updated on the COVID-19 coronavirus, all updates are available on the town's dedicated COVID-19 coronavirus webpage. It is www.longmeadow.org/coronavirus. And any update we put out is linked there, as well as information on social distancing. So you can always find something that's been distributed there if you didn't see it the first time around. The LED streetlight project phase 1 is substantially complete as of Tuesday. So this was last Tuesday because of the deadline to post for this agenda. So last Tuesday, a week ago, 91% of the Cobra headlight fixtures had been installed. Today we reached, today we had our update, and they are substantially complete, and now we're working through punch list items. But once the work is fully complete, Arden will begin addressing any issues that were identified the first sweep through town on installations. So they'll go back and do those punch list ones. You can follow along all of that work on the town website as well. There's an interactive map there. And if you notice an issue with an LED fixture after it's been installed, please email the DPW at publicworks@longmeadow.org so we can make sure we're tracking those. And Tanco submitted the first, actually it's now been 2 rate change applications to Eversource for adjustments to our utility bills. It's going to take a couple cycles to see that reflected, but we're looking for that in the next couple months. And the order for the decorative fixtures is in process and should be ready for installation by the end of May or early June. The landfill project, the cap was installed on phase 1 last week, and phase 2 is continuing with vegetation clearing, grading, and contouring. The Bliss and Laurel Parks master plan, that community meeting with the Conway School as part of the Bliss and Laurel Parks master planning process is going to be held on May 7th at 7 p.m. This will be via Zoom and streamed live on LCTV. Specific details will be released soon. And the trash and recycling hauling contract, we did a public bid process, and we reviewed and submitted the bids and held interviews with those vendors that submitted bids. Waste Management was selected to provide trash and recycling hauling for the town. Through the bid and negotiation process with Waste Management, we were able to reduce the 5-year total estimated expenses by over $103,000. from the original waste management RFP pricing, and that includes an additional $5,000 annual contribution towards recycling education and efforts. And the annual escalation averages less than 3% per year. Before we solicited the RFP, which was not required by law, it was something we did over and above what was required. Waste Management's original quote had an 8% escalation for 1 year and 4% for the following years. So we saw some substantial savings by doing the RFP process. And I want to thank the group that helped with that, including Mark Gold and Arlene Miller, Mario Mazza, Paul Pasturzik, and the procurement officer, Chad Thompson. A lot of work went into it, but it was well worth it, I think. And that was all I had. Thank you.
Congratulations. I think we should also mention, you talked about the net metering credits in your report, and that's another project of Mark Gold. So thank you, Mark, for bringing that to us several years ago, and it's been adding up over the years. So thank you very much. Let's go on to old business, approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for 4/6/2020 regular meeting?
So moved, Mark Gold.
Yeah. Seconded by Tom.
Tom Lakusha seconded it. Roll call vote. I mean, any discussion on the minutes? No? Okay, roll call vote.
I can't hear anything.
Debbie, can you hear roll call vote?
Yeah.
Or am I muted?
We can hear you. I think she's.
Marie?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Richard?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Tom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're moving on to
Wait,
discussion.
Maria, I had a question. Are we going to talk at all about the town manager's report? I just had a couple of.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Yeah, did you
Comments.
have any questions for Lynn?
Yeah, well, one is,
Tom?
yes,
Mhm.
thank you. You know, the LED streetlights, you know, I was looking out at the lights, and they really do cast a nice sort of glow. You know, it isn't overpowering. I think it looks attractive. But I was wondering, Lynn, if we've had any complaints about the lights and if people have even noticed a difference.
I've so far, and I'm going to knock on wood here, I have only received positive feedback, which is slightly unheard of in this retrofitting world of LEDs. So I'm taking that as a good sign right now. That may not be the case when we do the decoratives. I don't know if those, they're a little bit lower to the ground, and people may notice that a little bit more. It's hard to say, but so far I have only received positive feedback.
Okay. And then a question on the trash and recycling hauling contract. So how many communities were in this bidding process? Because you didn't mention the names of any other communities.
This was solely done by the town of Longmeadow. We went out to bid ourselves.
Oh, okay. Because in the past there's been an alliance. Is there any reason that wasn't used this time? Some of this was started a little bit before I joined the town, but there was a collective process at first, and some communities chose to continue to go that route, and some decided that they would take their chance and see if they could get better numbers, and that's what we did in Longmeadow. Okay. All right. Great. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Mark Gold, do you have any questions for Lynn?
No, none at all.
Richard Foster, any questions for Lynn?
None.
Okay, thank you. We did the roll call vote in the minutes. And
Yeah.
so we'll go down to the town election. You want to give us a little background of any changes that have occurred on the town election date, Lynn?
Sure. So there's no set changes yet. I've just been monitoring this. I've been talking with town council, and there's a very active MMA mass managers, administrators, mayors listserv right now. And everyone that has an election or had an election scheduled for May has moved it. And everyone that had an election scheduled for June is either standing by and waiting for the legislature to make a change. We're hearing that they will have something coming forward soon. I think a lot of people were waiting to hear what was going to happen with schools. That generally is a pretty good benchmark. And now that that has happened, I'm pretty confident that they'll do something to address elections in June if communities choose to push those out a little bit further. Otherwise, we would need to do, I think, a court order to change that date. But right now, I'm just continuing to monitor it and see, unless there's a strong desire from the board to do something outside of waiting for legislation.
Mark Gold.
Yeah, just a question, Lynn. I know Catherine Ingram is our town clerk, and she's kind of got her hands all, full with this stuff. But has there been any discussion about vote by mail, and is that got to be done on a state level, or is that something we could undertake? Because it seems to me that if we wanted to hold something in June, vote by mail, we probably have to get started in early May, getting the ballots voted, getting them out, and that kind of stuff.
Yes, so I need to check in with her about this. I had heard that the Secretary of State was looking at changing that so that you could do vote by mail, but I'm not sure if it was for municipal elections or if it was for the state primary in September. I need to do a little bit more research on that. And the other piece of that would be, we would need to know when our election, if we're going to hold it on June 16th still, then we could order ballots in order to allow for a vote by mail situation. But until we're certain on that, I don't think we could go ahead and order ballots yet.
So it's not something we could unilaterally say we're going to order ballots and plan on a vote by mail system. And I don't have any clue how we do that, but I assume,
I'm not certain at this point yet. I know there's been conversation about it, but I need to confirm that, where that is in the process.
Is there a date when we need to act by in order, or is it kind of thing we can send it out on May 15th and say, as long as it's postmarked by June, by June 13th, June 16th, we're good?
It depends on if they treat it similar to absentee ballots, which you need to get up to noon before the day of the election. I would imagine they would maybe keep it similar to that, but again, I'm not certain. I know a lot of municipalities had discussed this, doing something like this before COVID, just because they felt like it would increase voter turnout and responses in elections and getting more people involved. And the state hadn't been willing to budge on any of that. But this is a much different world now. So it's possible that they'll be willing to do that. But I know there was conversation about it for the state primary. I don't know if they're willing to do something for local elections yet, but it's certainly on my radar to investigate.
Thank you.
Richard Foster, any questions or comments for Lynn?
No.
Tom?
No, I just think that we should do anything we can do to keep Marie Angelides on the board as long as possible.
That's not happening.
Maybe a year. No.
Thank you. Lynn, my only comment is I don't think we have any contested races, do we?
I think there might be one. If you give me 1 second, I can pull that up. I asked Kathy for this before our last meeting, and she did provide it, but I haven't looked at it since then. So bear with me.
And then my other comment was going to be absentee ballots. You don't need to have an excuse or a reason why you're doing it absentee. So I think one of the things we should do is to figure out when those dates are, if we're keeping to the 16th, and maybe get the information out to people so that they can know how they can request a ballot and drop off the ballot, mail the ballot back in.
For absentee ballots remotely though, Marie, I thought.
What do you mean remotely?
Can you mail in or say a request or a?
Yeah, you don't have to have, they waived the reason that you needed to have, so you can actually still be in town, and health would be a reason to vote.
No, I understand that, but I thought you had to go to town hall to request the absentee ballot.
No, you can mail in a request.
Oh, okay.
In fact, some people have automatic requests in, and they automatically get ballots mailed out to them.
Okay.
It does not look like there are any contested races.
Okay. All right. So maybe, you know, if we, I think Mark is right. We better find the date that the absentee ballots at least are due in, or when requests can begin, so that we have a campaign of getting that information out to people.
Definitely. Yep, I will take care of that.
And any other questions or comments in regards to the election? No. Rebecca, anything you wanted to say in regards to the election? Okay. All right. Why don't we move on then to the town budget recommendations? I know that we were asking Paul to keep an eye on things and the revenues, and you want to give us a little update, Paul?
Well, certainly the longer this pandemic lingers, the more concern I have with the town finances. Basically, we're starting to see a lag in a few of the revenues, but more importantly, there's talk of the state not getting its revenues in a timely manner, and losing revenues per se. And there's been discussion of state cuts coming down the line, to the tune of about 15% of the unrestricted local aid, which is one line on the cherry sheet. Currently, we get about almost $1.5 million in that. And if we were to get a 15% cut from the current level of 2020, it would be about a $250,000 loss from what we have projected in the FY21 budget. So there's a substantial gap that potentially is growing there. There are a few other areas that I would be concerned with. I'm not concerned this year with our meals tax. We have already reached our projection for FY20 in meals tax, but certainly the turning upside down of the way the restaurants are operating, I would certainly look to FY21 and probably estimate that we're going to see some type of reduction. There's probably no doubt. Motor vehicle excise tax is another one that would be up in the air. Motor vehicle excise tax is estimated to be about $2.5 million in FY21. FY20, we're fairly much on track at this point in time. We won't know finally where we are until we get what's known as our third calendar 2020 commitment. The first two commitments, let me see, I'll go back. The first commitment, we were about $30-something thousand ahead of the prior year. Commitment number 2 was not so lucrative. The combination of commitment number 1 and commitment number 2 for motor vehicle excise, the commitments were about $20,000 less than they were a year ago. That could be a timing issue. It could be because commitment number 2 also came in, shortly after this COVID whole matter came about. It could just, like I said, be a timing issue, but I think we're also going to see an impact on our motor vehicle excise taxes going forward. Lynn and I have had a discussion. I think we probably do need to revisit the budget. We probably need somewhere in maybe about $500,000 in which to discuss. And that $500,000 can be made up in multiple fashions. It can be made up strictly with budget cuts. The other factor is you currently have a $311,000 tax levy that you have not used, anticipated for FY21. That provides a nice cushion. And the other thing too that we're projecting is we are projecting a higher amount of free cash going into FY21 because of the limited activity that is going on within the community. Let's say that the electricity is not being used at the school department per se as much as it would be. Professional development is not happening in any of the associations. That's basically stopped in mid-March and probably will stop right through the remainder of the fiscal year. There are certain other areas that things aren't just getting done as they normally would, but we would also see a higher amount of free cash coming in. So, that would mean too, with that higher amount of free cash, would the board be willing to utilize some of that higher amount of FY21 free cash to, could kind of put that money towards the gap that is now being created in FY21 because of these lost revenues. So there's a couple of moving parts. Like I said, I don't know how the board feels also about the $311,000 in the tax revenue that could be raised that were under the levy limit. But certainly Lynn and I are going to begin to take a look at the budgets, see where some amendments can be made. There probably will be some to the operating budget, probably some to the capital budget. We'll have a conversation with Superintendent O'Shea and Tom Mazza, because if we are falling short, they certainly will have to share in that shortfall if we're trimming the operating budget. So again, I think we're to a point where, a month ago I wasn't so concerned. My concerns are growing. And I don't know if the board has any, like I said, board has any comments looking towards that $311,000 in the tax levy capacity and or the potential of utilization of free cash that will be somewhat enlarged in FY21 because of what's happening currently in FY20.
Lynn, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, I think Paul summed it up. We've really started to have some of those conversations just in the last week or two. And I think they're just going to get more difficult. And the longer this goes on, the more sure of needing some relooking at the FY21 budget, and certainly what we can look at right now for FY20 and what the rest of this fiscal year might look like.
Mark Gold?
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, if we were even if we're not an operating for-profit business, in times like this, the first thing you say is we're going to freeze discretionary spending. And I don't know, frankly, what all of our discretionary spending is. Although I know Paul indicated things like training or purchases that we may not need. I assume that things we need for plowing the roads or taking care of that stuff. But I would hope that we're doing that. But also, even though we don't have the control over the school department budget, don't we have the right to ask the school committee what they're doing in terms of putting out a kind of an advisory that if they haven't done it now, they should be freezing discretionary spending, also letting us know what they anticipate is free cash coming through if they're not hiring consultants or they've got lots and lots of people. My sense is on on 990 consultant systems that they may or may not be using now through the balance of the year. And I think that we need to start putting together the numbers, because clearly I like Paul's idea of not doing something drastic and maybe seeing what we got for free cash this year if we really think it's a one-time kind of thing. But until we know what that free cash is, it's tough for us to make a decision. So I was hoping we could ask the school committee, if you haven't, consider freezing all your discretionary spending. We ought to do that. And we ought to start putting together what we expect free cash to be. It's not too early to do that.
Yeah. I have had some conversation with Tom Oz on the subject matter. Glad to hear from the select board that, again, that we probably should be looking at this. I was just waiting for this discussion to be had with the select board to see where the matter was going to go before I kind of asked Tom to, time to start making some conclusions here and ask them to, go back and look at their FY21 budget. I did want to, also give him a target number in which to look at. And I don't think he'll have a problem going to his committee. I think they'll fully understand that. But again, I think one of the things that they're concerned with is that with their large turnbacks, they would hope to be able to minimize their cuts, because if a budget is voted in June for them and they start the fiscal year or they start the school year in September, it's very difficult for them once that September school year starts to make cuts because they've already have a plan in place for the full school year. So having the conversation now and giving some directives will be great. But again, that free cash is going to be an unknown, and we're going to have to do the best guesswork that we have in order to minimize the cuts.
But Paul, as you said, I think that, the best way for the school committee to assure that they do have a full budget next year, because we're anticipating a full school year next year, is to maximize the turnbacks this year, because we will have a reduced amount of, certainly for the first few months, maybe for much of the year, some of this, what we call other income, whether it's motor vehicle excise tax, meals tax, that kind of thing, and even state aid. So I think that it behooves them to get on this program and maximize or reduce or eliminate their discretionary spending now. I hear a lot of comments about, are the teachers working? And the answer is, look, we've got a good workforce. We don't want to lose them, but we've got to make sure that we aren't spending money at the same rate we were before with schools out of session.
Again, I'll have the conversation with Tom over the next day or so. The one thing that I will say that over the last month, any PO from the school or from the town actually comes through me that I actually sign off on, where I would have maybe 10 or 20 purchase orders a day to approve. I'd be lucky if I have 3 or 4 at this point in time. So spending has been curtailed quite a bit already, and has been over for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Richard Foster?
Yeah, Paul, do you know on the transportation for the schools and their meals program, are the contracts arranged that we'll get rebates back on that?
I'm sorry, Richard, I couldn't hear you.
For the transportation for the pupils at school and for the meals program, are those contracts set up that we'll be getting rebates for the lack of services?
I would have to have a conversation with Tom regarding the transportation. That's an entity that they get their transportation through the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative. That should the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative have a deficit, because the town is a participant, the town would be looking to make up that deficit anyway. So I believe that Tom had told me that the school committee, at least at this point in time, had voted to make payments to them, at least in the short term. I'm not quite sure how long those payments has been voted to move forward on. With regard to the school lunch, I'm not 100% sure about what is going on there. Certainly the revenue has stopped. And I would have to assume that the expenditures have completely come to a halt there also.
Yeah, I had another thing too, Paul. We've got 2 facilities that are becoming online right after the beginning of this new year. Do we have any firm plans on the financial needs to bring these new facilities up at this point?
I did get a few numbers. I don't have them readily available from the OPM regarding electricity. So certainly that is available. And I know Chad is out bidding on electricity right now, and was getting those numbers to include in our, how much electricity we need in the upcoming year. And the only other thing, certainly there'll be supplies. I do not have a handle on the custodial supplies, but we certainly know how much a custodian will cost over at the Council on Aging.
Okay, that's it, Marie. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, Paul, every year we seem to talk about our bond rating, and I know one of the things that's calculated into it is the amount of free cash we have. Do you think Standard & Poor's is going to flex in terms of the bond rating formula, given the economic conditions? And if we took money out of that free cash to cover this $500,000, how would it affect our ratings if they didn't change things?
Well, Tom will be finding that out in a couple of weeks, because we are going to go out into the bond market in mid-May.
Okay.
We have our credit rating review in a week or so. I think we're probably going to be okay, because our reliance on the state aid is not as great as many other communities and certainly not as great as any city. I think what Standard & Poor's will probably be after most is how we anticipate getting back on our feet. And if we do use any type of reserves, how do we plan on replenishing those reserves is always the question. I will certainly explain to them that, you know, there are certain policies in place. I would certainly not recommend that the free cash that we do have coming in, certainly not all go towards the operating budget. Our normal annual amount is maybe $1 million in free cash, and maybe we look at anything over $1 million potentially can go back to the operating fund. But that would also give us a fairly substantial amount of still a fairly substantial amount of reserves. We're not touching, or do we intend, is not my intention to ever look at the operational stabilization fund, which we have put in money there over the year. We still have an article that will move forward at the annual town meeting to put another $250,000 in. So I think I'm pretty confident we will be okay and get that AA plus rating from them as we did last fall.
Okay. And is there any discussion about Standard & Poor's changing their formulas? Have you heard anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Paul, doesn't the bond rating follow the oil market, that they're now going to pay us to borrow money?
Yeah, sure. We'll keep on borrowing then.
Okay, Paul, I have a few questions. On the budget, do we count in the casino money?
Yes, we have $287,000 also that is in there from MGM. That's a good point, which I would put a question behind also.
Yeah, so I'm concerned about that, and I think the meals tax might get a tremendous hit. Right now you're looking at 250, but if you start adding the other two in, it could be more than that. A couple of questions. I was trying to think about Scantic Valley. I know there's not been a lot of use of the regular medical system, but the cost, a lot of, I don't know how many of our participants had the COVID-19 virus, but are those numbers going to come out in May? Will we be able to see, or is it more likely June we'll see how big a hit they took, or if they're in a positive?
With Scantic Valley, we have basically three providers: Blue Cross Blue Shield, Health New England, and Tufts. And Tufts is a very small player with the three of those. Blue Cross and Blue Shield is I don't have an update because we provide them a monthly level deposit and it's reconciled quarterly. And I have not seen that recent reconciliation. I think I will actually get it at the end of this month. But I will say for Health New England that on a weekly basis, I get the claims in on a weekly basis, and those claims on a weekly basis are down about $200,000 to $300,000 over the last couple of months, about $200,000 to $300,000 in a month. So if the indication of Health New England goes over to Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Tufts, Scantic Valley would be in a very good position. It would probably boost its fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. However, I would be reluctant to say FY21 will be a good year because I think a lot of these things are just on hold and being postponed, that we would have to really look at a 2-year window to see how we really did with the 2-year combination, if we're breaking even or not in that particular case.
And what about the pension? Historically, when the market has such a huge drop, could they come back with new numbers for us in September?
I have not seen that happen. So
okay.
we have our assessment.
We're already going up to maximum 8%, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, we're already going up to maximum 8%. We're anticipated to go up 8% for another 3 years. By the time they do another actuarial study, we'll be going up 8% for 5 or 6 years.
Okay, well, this year we went up at actually 10% when they put all the other numbers in, right?
Well, yeah, when when you take the share that Longmeadow had,
Mhm.
combine it with the 8%, we took a bigger hit this year. But their bottom line can only go up 8%.
Okay. And then you asked a question about using the levy limit, and I'd hesitate to bring up the taxes when people are having this much difficulty. I think if you're asking me, I would look towards a balance of free cash and decreases in the budget. I don't know if you want to talk about no new positions, or if you want to talk about some of those capital projects that aren't essential for this year. I hate to have a cut in pavement or streets because we're trying to catch up on that, but maybe some of the other projects, but that's a call you and Lynn can make. But I would hesitate to bring up the tax levy.
Yep. Okay.
Richard, do you have any other questions or comments for Lynn or Paul?
I had a question. Are we authorized to establish an early out program, or does that have to come from state?
I believe that has to come from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mark
That'll be
Gold?
it, Marie.
Okay, Mark?
I just wanted to know if we should, or if, we can just ask Lynn and to just get back to us on what we're doing to, to manage our expenses through the balance of this fiscal year, maybe at our next meeting. Like I said, discretionary spending is few and far between, and on the general government side of the ledger here. But at least to know what we're doing and what's changed, that might help us kind of put our arms around this problem.
Sure.
Tom, any other questions or comments for Paul or Lynn?
Well, I agree with what Mark is asking for. It would be nice to get some feedback. We had a regional select board meeting, recently, and some of the towns were hitting every budget, department, like 5% reduction. And I know we're not doing that, but it would be nice to see if we can get an idea about the kind of reductions that are happening. It sounds reassuring what Paul is saying with the less, requests for money. And Lynn, would you just support what Paul is saying? I mean, are you getting less requests? Are people kind of understanding the need to take actions to save money?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Paul is saying there, partly because people are hybrid between working in the office or working at home. So just the nature of the work is changed right now too. So we don't have people traveling. We don't have people going to conferences. I think everyone's just kind of holding steady right now. But I would agree with what Paul said too about the purchase orders are down. He and I had a conversation about that last week where I kind of raised similar questions.
Okay, thank you.
One last question. When do we have to have a decision? When does the warrant have to be, if we're still at the 23rd, when does the warrant have to be posted?
The warrant should be sent out right after the next meeting. So I think for the next agenda for May 4th, if we can put this on the agenda, Lynn and I can make some recommendations. And then whatever comes out of that board meeting, we would tweak the warrant material, and we would be able to then get it to the printer by, within a day or so after the May 4th meeting, and we would be all set to get it delivered timely enough for the June 23rd meeting.
Any further questions or comments, Mark?
Not on the budget issue, Maria. Just kind of a general issue, though, that I guess relates to this, and that may be, is there a chance that at the next meeting we can just ask either Beverly Hirschhorn or somebody from our Board of Health to just kind of report to the select board and to the town more than us on what they've been doing and what actions they may have been taking? I know there's a lot of things going around on Facebook pages and other things about the Board of Health, and maybe to give them an outlet through our meeting might be very helpful for them.
Lynn, any thoughts on that?
I can make that request.
Intent isn't to put Beverly on the spot, but just, we've got some really great people on the Board of Health.
Richard, any other questions or comments on this issue?
No, Marie.
Tom?
No.
Okay. I guess my concern is the warrant, we have to make this decision by May 4th. So anything any ideas you have, if you can just sort of, if you have it earlier, to get it to us so we can spend some time really thinking about it. Because that's going to be a lot of decisions made on the 4th. And I guess any changes in the budget, it's got to go to finance, should be able to see it too before we post it. So I just don't know how that choreography is going to occur.
I think the warrant has that the finance committee would make their recommendation on the floor at town meeting. So whatever changes we made, and they did this in case there were changes. So I think whatever recommendations or whatever changes are made, they will have an ample time to review it between, the first part of May and June 23rd in order to come up with their recommendation.
Okay, so what if we go in on May 4th, does it have to be posted on May 5th, or can we wait till the 6th? I mean, how close are we talking?
What's really driving this is the fact that we need to get it into the town residents' hands 2 weeks before the town meeting. So it's the time that it takes to get to the printer, review it, and everything like that. The actual warrant technically does not have to be posted until, I think it might be 10 days before the annual town meeting.
Well, because it would be, I know they did not say, they said they were going to do it on the floor because they weren't sure what we were going to do, if we were going to make any changes to it.
Right.
Yeah, and so I'll touch base with the chair of the finance committee and see if they're going to reconsider it once we do it, or as you said, it should just go to the floor. But I'd like it to be a little smoother this year since we're going to have a difficult town meeting.
Well, whatever decisions you make on the 4th, I mean, they will get them very shortly thereafter. So,
Okay.
they can make their recommendation one way or another from that point forward until town meeting. So they will have plenty of time.
Okay. The other question is, we'll move on to the warrant presentation. I know that other towns said they were doing things differently. Lynn, do you have any idea in regards to, right now we have a long warrant. I just don't know if you have any ideas if you're thinking of changing that at all.
I know we talked about it a couple meetings ago, talking about breaking it out, possibly. As this is just drawn on, and I don't necessarily see it being that much better to congregate in larger groups by the end of June. I do think maybe paring it down might be the best course of action. This is my first attempt at a town meeting, so I will need some guidance on exactly how we would pare that down, considering you voted on the warrant articles already.
Well, I know one town said they had they had 2 meetings for the same day, and one was a special town meeting within the regular annual town meeting, so that if things got really rough, we could always postpone the special for a second day. Because it is a lengthy one that we have set up, but it was just some thoughts. Mark Gold?
Yeah, I guess the concern I have is that do we think it's going to be any better in July or August or September or October in terms of the ability to put together big congregating groups? And obviously we don't know anything at all, but short of massive testing or some kind of a antidote or something for the virus, I can't imagine that until there's a cure or something that we're going to be allowed to do that. So I think what we do is schedule it, if you're going to do that, split it into 2 or 3 or 4 nights, and so it's manageable, and and we just can't knock through it.
Okay. Richard? Any thoughts on if we should do any creative thinking with the warrant and the length of it?
No, I haven't given it any thought, Marie, other than it seems the most obvious one is if we get tight on being able to meet, is trim it down to the bare minimum.
I know we talked about consent agenda the last time too.
Well, you could do consent agenda. That's basically trimming it down, as much stuff as you can group together. I think they're extraordinary times, so we may have to take extraordinary measures also with our warrant.
Tom?
Well, I think at prior town meetings, we have split the meeting into two different separate meetings. And that really does seem like a creative solution to this. And so I'd be open to looking at that. The only thing, the optimist in me says if there's only 13 cases in town at this point in time, we may be in a lot better shape, by then. So, so I'd like to play it as we get closer and may come to a final decision. But I could see having two meetings, so then you could just postpone the second. Sounds like a good solution.
So Lynn, would you think about, brainstorm maybe with your team on what would be the best way of handling it? And I know maybe discuss it with Rebecca. My only concern, of course, is not the financials as much as how many bylaws we have in there and if that should be carved out into a special meeting. And as you said, if you have a special meeting the same day, she can move it to the next day, but we'll think about it because we'll have to make the decision by May 4th.
Right.
And as long as we still haven't.
Yeah. And one other thing to add here, and I think we talked about it at one of the last meetings as well, is we've been having the moderator has convened a group of us to talk about town meeting, just logistics, knowing that we may not want people in one large room together inside. So one thing we're exploring is an outdoor town meeting and how we might be able to pull something like that off. But I think at this point, I feel like all of this has to be on the table. Just it's hard to predict what it's going to look like in 8 weeks' time or what the exact number of weeks is from there. So I do think we should just consider all of these options, whether it's an outside town meeting, whether it's over multiple nights, paring down the warrant. All of that, I think, should be continued to be discussed.
Okay. All right. So May 4th is going to be an important meeting. So let's go on down. There's new business. There's two items on new business. One we'll start with, there's a memo on tax, and it was a late document that got in. Lynn, do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yes, it was just an error for inclusion on the agenda tonight, but I did send it out to you so you had it in front of you. At least right now, we won't have any discussion on it, but we will need a special meeting for it. And just so the public knows what I'm talking about, it's a memo to move the tax deadline from May 1st to June 1st. Some of the legislative changes that were recently enacted to help ease this burden of COVID for members of the public to delay the tax payment, the property tax payment, and also to change the exemption application deadline. And Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, there was interest deferment in there as well. I have it up in front of me.
Yes, the penalties and interest on late payments on two particular commitments. The motor vehicle excise tax commitment number 2 was due or is due on May 6th, and the water sewer stormwater commitment that was originally due on April 6th. There would be no interest and or penalties that would accrue if those are paid by June 29th, I believe, or June 30th. We would not send out demand notices, nor would we're able to waive all the interest charges should the selectmen vote these recommendations.
So you're actually, Mark?
Yeah, just a quick comment. Apparently we can't vote on this because it wasn't on the agenda for a vote, but I think it would really help people in the town rather than waiting till May 4th to at least get a sense that it's the intent of the select board at their next meeting to, act on this and potentially even act favorably on it, so people can at least take a sigh of relief and not start rushing to get their payments in by, the current deadline.
Well, actually, we're looking for a special meeting on Friday just to vote on this. So it can, like you said, it has to get in front of the residents. So we were looking at a meeting at 9 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And I wanted to know if any of you would be available for either of those meeting times. Mark?
Yeah, I assume it's going to be a 10-minute meeting. Either one.
Either one? Okay. Richard, would you be available for either of those meetings?
Yes.
And did you have any questions or comments for Paul? Any questions in regards to this? I guess comments.
No, not yet.
Discussion. Okay. And Tom, would you be available for 9 or 4 o'clock on Friday?
Yes, I prefer 9 to get it over with.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we should do this. Yeah.
And did you have any questions in regards to what we're doing?
No, I don't. Not this time.
Okay. All right. So we'll look to post a meeting on Friday at 9 o'clock. And we'll do it by Zoom. If you want to just call in, since it's going to be a quick meeting, so that we'll be able to get the relief to the residents and they'll have the information.
Great.
It's 9 a.m. I'm sorry, you said 9?
9
Okay.
o'clock.
So we'll need to post it first thing in the morning.
Okay. That sounds good. And is there anything we're doing on any of the fees? Have we looked at that? But I'll ask that on May 4th, because I think in May is when we review our fees. And I just don't know if there's going to be any relief we need to give in the fees schedules that we have. But that could be after May 4th. All right. And the second item on new business is we're getting ready to interview people. And this isn't something that, and I sent out a quick email just for people to think about it. Everyone that is, well, we still have some vacant positions. And I made a list to let people know. Now I can't seem to find the list. Oh, here it is. We have 2 vacant positions in audit, 1 in the Board of Health, 2 for Cable Advisory, 1 for the Building Demolition Committee, 1 for Conservation, Housing Authority. The governor is supposed to appoint someone and he hasn't. So if anyone's interested, they're looking for names, the governor's office is. And 2 is available for recycling. And now there's a vacancy on Cultural Council. Everybody else is actually, a majority of people I contacted just to get a feeling, they are going to re-up. And so they've already been on the committees. And instead of going through this whole process of interviewing, Lynn came up with some creative thinking. And one was that we could have a subcommittee of select board members to interview. We could also waive an interview if the person that's recommended by the committee and they've already had a term on the committee. So I think to move things along and to avoid what's often a laborious process for volunteers, we could go either of those 2 ways. And I wanted to get a feeling from the select board how they felt about a waiver or the subcommittee voting, interviewing, and then we would vote. Right now, I do not see contested positions. If there was contested positions, of course, it would have to come in front of the select board. But right now, there does not appear to be contested positions. Mark, what are your thoughts on our process?
I like either one of them. The problem is I thought that our charter required people to be interviewed by the select board. And so, I think there's a requirement of this interview process, which, we all thought was kind of goofy, especially when you know how most of these interviews go. I mean, I guess my personal concern is that, give people the Zoom phone number and say, okay, you're calling in at, 7:05 and you're calling in at 7:07 and you're just calling it, and just knock it through in a regular select board meeting. Because
the subcommittee would also fulfill the obligation of the select board interviewing.
It'd still have to be done by Zoom or something like that, and that's fine. If that fulfills the legal obligation, then let's go through a subcommittee. I mean, the whole interview process gets a little absurd sometimes in our town.
Okay, Richard, do you have any thoughts?
Make it as simple as possible, please.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, if it's legal to just waive it, given the certain conditions, that would be great. But if we have a legal precedent, then we should, make it simple and just let it happen.
Okay, so Lynn, could you review that and make sure it would be legal for us to go through a subcommittee?
Sure.
And then we could also ask them in the future if we could waive these with the approval of the recommendation by the chair of the committees.
Sure.
Okay. And at least that will move things along for people. I'm just so happy that people are, sending in their applications, because I know this is a stressful time, but people seem to be interested in staying on the committees. And that way we'll make sure that we have a full set of committee working for us this upcoming year. And the last thing I had on subcommittee reports is we're going to have to decide by May 4th whether we're going to have a warrant article regarding the tax ceiling. So, Mark, do you think you'd be able to get a recommendation of the two options from the task force?
Yep, we'll get that before May 4th.
Okay. Is there anything else people feel we need to have on the May 4th meeting? No? Okay. Any residents, if we're misplacing a topic because we're in the middle of the COVID process, let us know what we might be missing in the way of town business. But I have to thank the employees again. You just don't realize how much work is occurring behind the scenes. And a special commendation to Erica at Human Resources. There's a lot of work being done in trying to figure out what is best for employees at this time and for the town and moving forward. And my understanding, the software and the work being done on the computers is tremendous, because all these updates and changes have to be made as people are working remotely. So thank you very much for the hard work done by her and her team. Any other questions or comments, Mark?
None.
Richard?
Nothing, Maureen.
Tom?
No, thank you.
Lynn?
Nothing.
Oh, well, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Okay, so Tom moved it. The second was Mark Gold?
Yep.
Okay, roll call vote, Debbie.
Marie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We will have a quick meeting on Friday just to pass that one topic. And then afterwards, we'll be on air on May 4th, and we'll make some pretty big decisions that night in regards to the town meeting. So thank you very much for joining us, and stay safe. And what is it? Separate, socially distance together, right? Longmeadow, socially distance together. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.